Welcome to the show, everybody. Totally honored today to have Colin LeMahieu. He is the creator of Nano, or the artist formerly known as RaiBlocks. Welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to be here.
Now, I think one of the first things we have to really get for anybody who hasn't heard of Nano before, give us the elevator pitch. What are you guys doing?
We are trying to focus on high speed, low cost transfer of value. So it's trying to get that part of like cryptocurrency. There's a lot in cryptocurrency, and we're just focusing on that part and trying to make it as efficient as possible and like solve it. So that's what we're trying to do. It's simple, but it has a surprising number of applications, I think.
Well, simplicity is great, and you see a lot of very complex projects out there that, yeah, they try to solve something, but actually one of the simplest and most important things is actually the transfer of value. And I think people kind of forget about that sometimes. That's why Bitcoin's so popular. It just transfers value from point A to point B. Now,
Yeah, definitely.
as mentioned, until a few days ago, it was RaiBlocks, but now we're Nano. Why the rebrand?
It's always been kind of a comment that people had. They're like, RaiBlocks, that's interesting, and that's not a ringing endorsement. So, it's kind of hard. It's a little hard to say. It's a little hard to describe. Nano, people had comments about it saying it's a generic term, but that's kind of like what we're aiming for. It's supposed to be something that is memorable and easy to say. So that's what we aim for. Think of like Square or something where it's just like simple. You remember it and you know what it does.
That's it.
So
It sounds techy,
Yeah, it's a little techy. I mean, the blocks part of RaiBlocks was super techy, and people were like, I don't get what this does. Why blocks? That's weird. So.
I think rebrands can be useful. I think especially early in the game, a rebrand is useful. Now you can build that name going forward, because RaiBlocks was a fairly new project, and now, Nano can really just take its own. How does a block lattice differ from a blockchain?
So the reason to make that difference was for speed reasons. And the problem kind of comes down to like how the software worked. When you have a bunch of different people trying to do something to the same piece of data, like it creates conflict, and something needs to like manage that conflict in the software and slows it down. If you can avoid that type of conflict anywhere, your system's going to be able to operate a lot faster. So what we observed is like in the usual case, I designed it so that like in the usual case, there aren't conflicts. Of course, there's attackers in the network, and they do create the conflict that takes a longer time to like fix. But we designed it so that it doesn't affect everyone else. Like people can keep transacting as good actors, and then only the people that are like doing stuff they shouldn't be doing are slowed down. And that's kind of the goal.
Okay, great. It's certainly, blockchain technology is, of course, fantastic, but we have seen a lot of different iterations of different forms of kind of achieving those similar end goals anyway. So certainly interesting. Now, I think a lot of people out there feel like, hey, wait a second, I missed the ICO. Why didn't I get to invest in this ICO? Now, of course, the answer is you guys didn't quite do an ICO. Can you talk about the initial distribution of Nano, how that happened, and why you chose that model?
Yeah, it was for a couple reasons. Some of them were just I didn't personally know the legal ramifications of it. Some people advised against it. A lot of people do it, so I don't know if it was really a worry. But yeah, I like the faucet because it put a lot of these coins into a lot of people's hands, and it turned out that it got it to a lot of people that otherwise would have no access to cryptocurrency. It was like an evolution. That was an accidental like discovery. I completely underestimated how many people or how much time people would spend clicking captchas. So when I found that people like in third world countries were doing this essentially as a job, they were making more money clicking this than they would make at a job. I mean, that was interesting, and it got a lot of people. Like a large amount of our community is Spanish speaking, and a lot in Indonesia. So I think that was really beneficial. So I guess like, why did we do that? It was, I didn't feel like we needed to pull in a bunch of money through an ICO, and it partially like load tested the network. You know, we get a bunch of transactions going from a bunch of people, and got that for free. So that was nice. It worked out pretty well. I've been really happy about that, actually. Like, that worked out way better than expected.
It's pretty cool, and like you said, it actually got a good spread. So I mean, for anyone who didn't know, they basically just ran a faucet where you could go do a captcha and get rewarded with RaiBlocks. Now, when that was going on, like, what would you get? Like, you know, 0.01 XR, or sorry, Nano, 0.01 XRB per click, or? Actually,
we originally was giving you 1,000 per click, so that was in the original days, and then that was melting my server because it was actually doing a live transaction every single time someone clicked it. So we eventually had to figure out, you know, a better way to do this is to pick a rate at which we want the RaiBlocks to be distributed, like pick our final time and then divide it up, and then that's how many per hour we need to do. And then we just totaled all the clicks and then did a weighted distribution based on how many you did compared to how many other people did, and handed it out. So it wasn't a fixed number, but that's kind of what they got.
Very interesting. Now, obviously, like you said, a lot of people who participated in the distribution of Nano at the start are from third world countries. We say less wealthy countries, perhaps, you know, places like Venezuela. Why is technology like Nano a good fit for these people? A good fit for these countries, perhaps?
Yeah. I think that actually, like, these type of markets deceptively have a better use case naturally for a currency, like a digital currency, than people in first world countries, frankly. Because honestly, when you talk with people that don't understand cryptocurrency and they ask why use Bitcoin, why use any cryptocurrency, I have a credit card, it's faster and it's cheaper, and I'm like, yeah, I can't disagree with you there. Like, I like the concept, but these people in these countries, their problem is that they don't have access to banks. They don't have access to credit cards. They do largely cash transfers. Cash has issues. You need to carry it. It can get stolen. They don't have access to banks, and they want all these things. And cryptocurrency is a way to offer that to them. So it's a natural fit for them. We don't have to sell them on it. We don't have to convince them to use it. They want to use it, and that's coincidental but amazing. Yeah.
It's really interesting, actually, to see how, really, like you said, people in the first world don't understand because we have access to all these technologies already that make our lives easier, but there's a massive percentage of the world's population that doesn't have a bank. They've got one of these.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's all they need.
That's the key. It's like they have access to the internet and cell phone, and if we can make that be a bank for them, like, they're on board.
I think one thing as well that really is so important to keep in mind is that the crazy inflation in places like Venezuela, where even if you have cash money, no matter how much you have, tomorrow it's worth half, or tomorrow it's worth, you know, 90% less, and it's just you can't buy bread anymore. But you're, as volatile as we like to think cryptocurrencies are sometimes, they're less volatile than a fiat currency like the Venezuelan bolivar, you know, so really can understand the use cases there. Now, I wanted to talk about your competition. Now, how do you compare, for example, to IOTA?
I mean, we're doing a little bit different thing than they are. They add things like data payloads to it, and they're trying to like do machine-to-machine stuff. So it's like a little bit different aspect than what we're trying to do. I mean, mostly, what I keep an eye out for is, are there other people trying to do value transfer payments in an efficient way? And, you know, there's a couple of the people that are really focusing on that, like that's their primary thing. But I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think ours achieved a little bit better. But, you know, I'm not
I would hope you'd be biased for your own project.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I try to like see good ideas where they are, and you know, we're all really trying to like make this new technology work. So I don't see them as like competitors as much as, you know, we just have different ideas on how to do things, and we're going to try it out.
great. I love that. You know, so many people think this is a zero sums game where one coin has to rule them all and destroy all others. And actually, there's a lot of different ways to get to the same end goals. And there's a lot of different communities that will end up using those. You know, maybe Nano's going to have massive support communities in Venezuela and India, for example. But people in America might not use it very much as an example. But those communities will make it highly valuable. So,
yeah.
How about scalability? How do you deal with the scaling issue?
Like our primary way of dealing with scaling is by removing any sort of things that don't need to be there. Remove inefficiencies, things that have costs. So like the first thing I looked at when designing this was like mining, proof of work mining. That's an expense that needs to be paid somehow on the network. And if you could make a system that doesn't require it, and it satisfies all of what you want out of it, that would be better because it's a less of an expense. If it doesn't satisfy it, you know, then you have to do a trade-off. So that's our primary thing. A lot of it's just going to be software engineering. We have to do a good design on it. It takes a lot of people, a lot of thinking about it. It's an open network, so we have to do a lot of like attack considerations. But it's just like boring software engineering, drawing squares and lines on paper, what it does.
How about pruning? Is that an option that you're looking at to keep it sort of a lightweight?
Yeah, definitely. So pruning is basically just not having any of the history around for certain nodes, only the ones that are interested in it. We're actually working on something right now. People that are in the tech of RaiBlocks know that we have like 4 block types right now. We're trying to do a thing called a universal block. But basically it tracks some of this information that you'd have to like otherwise calculate and keep more data around. But if we do a universal block, then it's super small. You know exactly where the state of this account is at a given point in time. And then we can prune it. Ideally, we would like to prune it so that we only need to keep one piece of data for every account in the system. And that's pretty much like the most optimal way to do it. You need to know the balances and what account they're associated with. You just need to know where all the money is. Mm-hmm. And that's the minimum amount. And I can't really think of a much smaller way to do it. If I could, I'm going to do it.
All right, there you go. And what about transactions per second? What kind of a load can Nano currently handle, and what is the theoretical number per second?
Yeah. Well, the theoretical number is there's no theoretical limit on it. There is a limit because we run on real world things. It's on hardware. So we actually had one of our community members who's now kind of in our core team. He did a load test on it. It looked like it, for the time being, it was like 100, maybe up to 200 transactions per second, depending on how you look at it. So we learned a bunch of stuff from that. We want to make improvements on it. It's kind of just going to be a matter of like iteratively going over it and seeing how high we can get it. I mean,
And now, as the network grows, does the number of transactions per second possible grow, or is it limited by the network?
It's limited by the network. The limiting factor mostly, and this is going to be bandwidth. As the number of transactions goes up, you need to communicate what's going on in the network. And the number of nodes doesn't make it faster. It shouldn't make it slower. Mm-hmm. We can't have it doing that. So it's pretty much just going to be proportional to like hardware at the time, bandwidth, IO, and to a lesser extent CPU.
Okay, very cool. What about attacks? So if I remember, this is it a feeless transfer with Nano?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So if it's a feeless transfer, how are attacks prevented?
Which type of attacks, like spamming attacks?
For example, yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we have a small proof of work essentially on a transaction. Those familiar with like the original use case of proof of work, the hash cache or whatever to prevent email spam. I mean, that's essentially what we're doing. It's just like, have you spent some time in order to like do this transaction? It's like, yes, okay, it's going in there. It doesn't like stack it, kind of like how Bitcoin does. Mm-hmm. So it's like a proof of work limiter, and we are looking at that because it's like we want a larger headroom on it. Right now people have looked at it and they're like, I'm a little iffy on the headroom on it, and I'm like, yeah, like valid concern. We're going to look at it.
Okay. Okay, so, and thinking about the nodes, for example, how do you incentivize people to run nodes if there's no fees for them to collect?
Yeah, that one is a pretty common question. Like the people that are going to be running the representative nodes, I mean, those are the consensus decentralizing parts of the network and the most important parts. I envision those being people like exchanges or like e-commerce platforms, basically anyone who has a vested interest in the network. And the reason why they have a vested interest in the network is that it solves a business problem for them. They're, think of like a retailer, they're selling a good. And the reason they come to us is because credit cards are charging them 2% and we charge them 0%. So they have a 2% margin in their bottom line that we are solving. So that amount of money, to a much smaller extent, because our nodes are very cheap to run, can be allocated towards keeping our network healthy. And we just want lots of them. So it's decentralized.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So I mean, it's a cost saving incentive, which businesses understand. It's just not what has been typical in cryptocurrency, which is a return on running it.
Very cool. What about forks? So let's say that part of the Nano community doesn't like the direction things are moving in and they want to keep the code and move off to a different place. Is that possible, or have you implemented technology to stop that from happening?
No, I mean, it's all open source with reason. I don't think anyone would accept it if it wasn't open source, and I like open source. It should be, especially at the protocol. It can be forked. It's going to be a little bit hard to do because unlike blockchains or how Bitcoin operates, you have to redo the genesis and redo the distribution in a way that people will accept and consider fair. If you just take our software, replace the genesis block, which is entirely possible, I'm sure people have done it already, and then run it, they don't have the network effect that we do. Everyone kind of already has balances in our thing, and they won't have balances in that new system. So people will just kind of be like, I don't know why I'm going to do this, in my opinion. I don't know. If they want to fork it, they can.
Interesting.
I mean, people have tried, haven't been successful yet. So I don't know.
So there's a lot less incentive to actually fork it, in the sense that they would have to start all over again. They could take your code, but they wouldn't, like with Bitcoin, get a bunch of free coins every week.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they have to take on the expense of doing the distribution, which it was hard.
I can imagine. A lot of people probably would not want to do that, without a doubt. Now, what about voting? Does holding a Nano give me any kind of voting rights within the network?
Voting as to like what? Changing protocol, or voting
for
as
example?
In like solving? Not particularly. I mean, we haven't held like a vote on anything. I don't know.
Okay.
It's hard to do.
Fair enough. So, how about the latency of Nano? How often are blocks coming? I know that the guys at EOS are looking at the sub-second latency. How are you comparing to that, and what are your thoughts around it?
Yeah, so ours, like when you publish a transaction, it's not dependent on like any other transactions in the network. So essentially every single time you make an action, the time it takes to like complete is determined by how long it takes for that information to propagate across the entire network. And if there's a fork, it has to like resolve that. So it takes a little bit longer. Mm-hmm. So, but it's all on an individual basis, and it's mostly tied to latency of how fast you can communicate on the internet. So we designed it so that it's solved as fast as possible. Like as soon as new information arrives, it's propagated out. I don't know exact numbers on it, but it should be less than seconds. Like internet latency, depending on where you're going, is like 50 milliseconds, 100.
Yep.
Times 5 if there's a fork, I mean, it's fast. I can't think
That's
of
pretty fast. Well, this is the thing too. I think, again, a lot of people get really caught up on you know, these numbers, and it's like, yeah, well, I have to have the half second. No, we got 1 second. It's not fast enough. I only have to, you know, if it's not half second, I don't want it. It's like, guys, really, how quickly do you need? You know, think about how long it takes to do a credit card transaction or something, right? It's a lot of these solutions are actually as fast or faster. So now some people say that Nano is centralized, that it's not a decentralized project because there's such a small number of nodes, for example. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid thing to look at right now. It's designed at a protocol level to be decentralizable. And right now, if you look at the unit of decentralization is basically how many representatives do we have and how distributed is that histogram of who has the weight. And right now, you know, a lot of the official reps have it, and that's not something that I want by design. That was more of a, you know, initial bootstrapping, getting everything kind of going. And we're going to be focusing in the future on like getting more people active in that. And ideally, I'd like to shut down all the official reps. We shouldn't have official reps at all in the long term. And that is our goal. We have node things that we're like working on right now, and then we'll get to reps and move on, get it decentralized, because that's the point of all of this.
Yeah, I do understand that. I think, and maybe a lot of people don't, that actually at the start, when you're, okay, there's like 10 of us here that are using this, you know, so that's as decentralized as it's going to get right now. But the long-term goal is for decentralization, like you said, to move it away from the reps. And I think that's good, but you know, something to keep in mind, will take a little bit of time. Now, what about, you know, it's very popular right now, by the way, to implement privacy features on your coin. You know, it's also very popular to throw some smart contracts on there. You know, you want to hop on and do some smart contracts, maybe some privacy features, EK snarks, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I love the concept of privacy features. Like if I found a technology or like some math that I trusted that would actually like solve the problem very well, like that would be very, very compelling. Truly anonymous is better than pseudonymous, almost unequivocally. As far as like smart contracts, it's a little harder to do. And the reason I didn't implement them, and I don't plan on implementing them, is just because that would take a lot of time to do. It's a significant like endeavor. Like a lot of people put a lot of time on it. And I think they're doing a pretty good job on it. Like I know Ethereum does smart contract. Lots of people do smart contracts, and you know they plug along. Like this was kind of a focused effort on a one piece of technology aspect, so it can be solved. And I think we just got to kind of go on that one thing. Even though people would like smart contracts, we're just going to do the value transfer.
Well, it's like you said, value transfer is more powerful than I think people give credit to it. So. Yeah. Although the privacy features, that could be fun if you find something you like in the future. Now,
100%. If I could turn a switch, I'd turn it on.
So you go. Keep your eyes open, everybody. It might be coming one of these days. Now, what about hardware wallet integration? Can we expect to see Nano compatible with the Ledger, Nano S, I share the same name, or the Trezor at some point in the near future?
Yeah, we definitely want to. Part of the thing right now is we're doing work for these guys in order to make it easier for them to sign transactions. That actually kind of ties into this universal block that we're doing. That makes it significantly easier for them to do transactions. So we're getting that done for them. You know, they're already looking at it a little bit to see how to implement everything, and we'll see how it goes. We're going to make sure that it's working solid, because there's no point in putting out a broken thing.
That's true. That's true. So just a matter of time. Just a matter of time. Now, speaking of wallets, how has the Nano wallet been performing? Have you found any bugs yet? What has been your response if you have found those? What's the experience been for people?
I think that the wallet was essentially like the current one on the desktop was a development tool, and everyone can tell it's a development tool. It's had some issues syncing, and we've gotten a lot of help from the community on that. They've fixed a lot of things and made it significantly faster. We do have the two new wallets that we're trying to do, the mobile one and the desktop wallet, which will be like an Electron-based wallet. It'll look better. But yeah, we got those things in the pipe. There have been like a smattering of issues. You know, graphical issues or feature requests.
But all things
Yeah.
that are being worked out. And I think, to be honest, all things that are to be expected, at least to a certain extent, with newer projects. There will be learning curves, there'll be things that are impossible to envision before they happen. So
yeah, I think like the biggest thing is just kind of RaiBlocks operates a little bit differently. So people that come from other coins are sometimes confused by the jargon, and sometimes we have extra things in there that don't need to be represented. So it's just user experience. We need to better improve on it.
Yep, always an important thing to consider, absolutely. Now, what about the people behind Nano? So you can tell me about, I guess a little bit about your experience, but also the people working with you. What's the team comprised of?
It is probably, I would say, about a dozen people right now. Half of them are mostly technical in certain aspects. And then others are, community management, and some people are doing like a lot of the business development stuff, talking to exchanges, talking to vendors, and setting up. We have a person doing legal things because we're in a financial type of situation. So, that's kind of like what else would you like to know on them?
I get, really, I guess, what's your backgrounds, for example? I know people can go and check out the LinkedIn's, and that's always fun for them to do too. But what got you into doing this? What was the experience that brought you to actually creating a cryptocurrency like this?
Oh, okay, yeah. I do software development. I've done it through my entire career. What brought me into cryptocurrency is I loved the idea. Like when I first heard about Bitcoin, it's like I loved it. I was like, this is going to be world changing. And then I didn't really invest in it. I looked at it a few years later and I was like, okay, so
why didn't I invest in it?
Yeah, why didn't I invest in it? But also just like I thought it would be bigger, faster, and I was just like, what are the holdups here? So then I just like investigated it and then came to this design. That's how I got into it. And I think other people, we have another developer that's doing it full time, Russell, and he also does software development. He's worked on a couple of the coins, so it's good to have him on board because he brings experience in cryptocurrency. You can't just grab any software developer to do this. They have to really understand what we're doing here. Zach has done payments, working on mobile.
Mm-hmm.
Troy is our community manager. He's done PR stuff and he's doing great talking with everything. So.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, and what about business partners? Have you got any sort of high-level partnerships yet? Or are there any companies that you're working with or retailers that are accepting Nano, for example?
We don't have like business partnerships per se. Like we're not partnering with a company to do things. We are definitely talking to any vendors that like come to us. We're seeking out exchanges, but like the interesting thing is like vendors are coming to us specifically because of the no fees thing. Like these are business savvy people and they have a bottom line to meet and they understand the value of replacing a credit card system that charges them a fee with something that doesn't charge them any fee. Like that is profit for them. So they're seeking us out. And we're just trying to like get the technology in a place where we can reliably say, you can do this and it is solid. The worst thing would be like getting them on this and then they don't get what they're expecting. And then it's damage to the brand. It's damage to the whole thing. It's like, we want Nano to be successful and we're going to tell people when it's appropriate to use it.
Yeah, it's really hard to get people back once a mistake's been made, without a doubt.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, like, vendors, they need on-ramps and off-ramps. They need to trade into fiat currency. They need to trade out of it. If we don't have exchanges, then it's like they can turn it on, but it's not very useful to them. So it's just kind of like a stepwise process to do it.
All right, cool. Now, what's the marketing plan? How do you guys expect? I know there are people coming to you now, which is fantastic, but how are you planning to get the message out about Nano to even more retailers so that you get more of a word of mouth and all that network effect coming, more people coming to you? What's the marketing plan?
That one, we are we have to primarily, first of all, make sure like our technical bases are covered. So that's the primary thing. That's not a marketing need. However, marketing in the future, what our focus on is, the ethos we're trying to do is like appealing to everyday people and not just like cryptocurrency enthusiasts. So our message like in marketing is going to be simplicity. It needs to be seamless into everything that we're doing. People essentially need to not know what Nano is and they're still using it. And when we achieve that, like that's going to be our success criteria. That's kind of how we're marketing. So it's not like a like brand recognition as much as a utilitarian aspect. I don't know if that
that does make sense. And to be honest, I think again, a lot of people actually don't think about these situations, that a lot of the technology behind something like this, for example, they have no idea who the providers are. They have no idea how the technology works, but they know that they pick it up and they can use it. And that, of course, is the important thing. So to be that back-end solution for businesses to be able to transact, or for people to be able to transact value, is, of course, very important. Now, what about the roadmap for Nano? Where are you going? What can we expect in the next year, for example, 2018? What's it have in store for the team at Nano and for Nano, the currency?
Yeah, definitely. So we are doing things like pruning the universal blocks. Those are like the technology aspects of what we're trying to do. We are focusing on exchanges, getting all that nailed down. And then from there, I mean, I think if we get those two things set, that is our like solid foundation that we can build on. And then we can start really working with the vendors that are like trying to reach out to us right now and be like, okay, this is how you integrate. This is how you integrate. And it's just going to be a constant integration, essentially like a consulting thing from then on, teaching people how to do it. How does cryptocurrency work? We also have we want to, a lot of what we're doing when we start getting into payments is there's going to be like regulatory things. We want to make sure that people understand that how cryptocurrency weighs into the game. A lot of people don't understand what it means. It has negative connotations in a lot of circles, and we don't think that it's warranted. And we want to like work with people and be like, no, this is actually a great thing. It's efficient. It's going to save people money, and they're going to love it. And we just need to figure out how to deal with this new technology that's coming out.
Congratulations, by the way, on winning the Binance community coin vote.
Oh yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's great because, you know, you don't have to pay that giant listing fee, but at the same time, I think it's really important that it shows there was massive community support for this project. I mean, I think it won by miles, so that's really cool. Now, the final question here for you: if anybody out there wants to reach out to you guys or to get involved in the community, how can they do that?
Yeah, I think our community, like what you were saying, is our biggest strength. Like the Binance thing, deceptively, like the core team did not have to do a lot of effort to this. It was almost primarily a community driven thing, and they wanted it. And I'm very appreciative of like how much they've helped. Like contributing, anybody can contribute to it. Like my difficulty right now is, you know, we've jumped a lot in the last few months, and it's a matter of like figuring out how to like utilize people appropriately, and just like figuring out who can do it, who's capable of it, and then getting them to do it. So, I mean, the easiest way is to like, we do a lot of work in our Discord channel right now. So, I mean, that's the easiest way to contact us. And, you know, just talk. We have a ton of community managers. We have a ton of core people. They're very friendly. I mean, that's why we picked them. It's like we want to talk with people. We want people to be excited about it. And I mean, that's how they can get to us.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. Well, Colin, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and talk about Nano with us. I think it's a really exciting project, and I know that there's a lot of excitement out there about it, so I'm sure that people will be really excited to see this.
Definitely. Awesome.